Well, you have worked in the nonprofit sector, so choosing to, really niche down in your ascending in leaders program, and the services that you offer, what was the gap that you saw or the challenges that you saw nonprofits facing to really niche down in this area?
Well, I can probably answer that in two ways. So one, a lot of it was personal experience, and then the other one would be around storytelling. So let me start with the storytelling, and then I'll tell you about the first thing that I said. So there is a need for nonprofits to tell their stories, and I came up with this really cool concept of how to tell an organization's story, and it's through the 5 stages of story arc. And I once I landed on that, and if you don't know what the 5 stages are, it's exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. I started to tie into the elements of like exposition. That would be like the populations that you work with. The rising action would be the problem. How is it getting worse? The climax would be the nonprofit and the work that they're doing in the community to help turn that those negative things around. And then the falling action was simply, well, how are you doing? Like what programs, da da da. And then resolution is just the way it sounds. Well, what are your outcomes? Is it successful what you're doing? I wrote our organizational story that way, and our funding increased dramatically. I think when I started at the organization, it was maybe 750,000 a year the year before I started. By the time I left 3 years later, we were almost at 1.5 million. So almost being able to double it. And I really do believe it was through the strength of storytelling.
And your work, like you said, requires navigating tough conversations around race, gender, and opportunity. What strategies do you use to foster and keep trust and keep people engaged when the topics get uncomfortable?
Oh, that's such a good question, Haley. I just got off a call um, before you and it's an organization, it's a corporation, and they want to have these conversations. They really do, which is why they brought me on. And it's also not a desire, but an understanding of, well, we can't hit people over the head too hard because then they're going to shut down, which I completely understand, and we live in a very divisive climate right now. And so, to answer your question, I can think of one particular instance, and I won't go too wordy into it, but it was the first meeting post inauguration. I was facilitating my group. I felt it was necessary to acknowledge, the elephant in the room, and I said, "All right, before we start, just if you want to talk about how you're feeling, I'm going to give you space." And the majority of the group shared what they felt, and I have no expectation that everybody has the same leanings. And so one person in the group was like, he just says, "Man," he goes, "y'all are being so divisive. And this is why I didn't want to come to the circle today. I had a feeling like this was going to happen." And he talked and talked. And as he was talking, I'm there as a facilitator. I'm like, okay, well, I don't want this to go sideways. And so he happened to be sitting, and I'm glad we had the conversation, Haley. He happened to be sitting next to the circle agreements. And that was my North Star. So as he was expressing, rightfully so, his feelings, and he says, "Look, I didn't vote for that person, but this is what I feel, and da da da, and I don't feel like this is a safe space anymore for me." After he was done talking, I pointed him to the circle. Well, I pointed everybody to the circle agreements, and they all look at it. And I said, "I want us to kind of focus on the first two, listening from the heart and speaking from the heart." And I told him, and to the group, but to him as well, I said, "This space has been created to have these unfiltered conversations where we can be raw, because if we go out into the real world, maybe we work in spaces where it leans a certain way and we don't have that opportunity to have that conversation. Here we can do it." So I said, "That's not going to change." I said, "And that's where they're speaking from the heart." And I looked at him and I said, "And how you just spoke from your heart." And I said, "And then that lends itself to the second part, the listening." I said, we listened, or I listened to you from my heart as you were expressing what you were saying, and just reminded him, but again, more in a general sense, of that's why listening from the heart is important too, because what he said was hard, what they said was hard, and but we have to have that space to say the hard things so that it's less about agreeing to disagree, but more about feeling valued, heard, and seen. And I think that was the biggest takeaway post conversation in the immediate after that conversation happened was like, oh, okay, yeah, he felt better. And and I'll just close with this. He felt at the end, he said, because when we asked that question, what are your takeaways? He was like, this was my favorite session. He goes, I honestly thought that you, meaning the people in the group, were going to shut him down, were going to judge him. And he said he didn't feel that at all. He felt listened to, he felt valued, and he felt seen.
Yeah, and I feel like when you hear this, like when people are on their deathbed, they don't say, they wish they would have worked more. They wish they would have spent more time with their family or their loved ones, and that's what continues to drive our purpose is the relationships that we have. And if you could envision the next year for the Hood, what would success look like for you and the communities you serve?
Oh, again, a great question. One, and it's always going to be the goal, is to expand ascending leaders in color. Six of the seven cohorts were in Pima County and in person. I had one that was virtual, and a mutual friend that you and I know, Deanna Farias Heinrich, was a part of that. And I want to expand the program nationally. There is a need for it everywhere, and having the ability to bring these circles using the restorative circle process. A lot of people have said exiting ascending leaders that it was life changing for them. They've done major job shifts and job switches because they realized maybe their current employer wasn't perfectly aligned with their values, and so they're like, I need to move into this space. So, number one, above all, I would love to see that expand. Number two, I do enjoy spreading the message of the work that I do. I don't feel like I necessarily need to be on stage. I do feel comfortable on stage. So, getting more keynote opportunities to spread kind of just what we've done, said on this podcast, of how I envision us working together, collaborating, healing separately, but leading collectively. I want to spread that more and more and more so that people have the tools and resources to do that in each of wherever I'm presenting. I would love to see those two things kind of expand, ascending leaders and opportunities to present across the nation to audiences who really want and would connect to the message.